Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, we'll start with Quran. I'll recite a few verses of the Holy Quran, and then we'll move on to the poetry, and then we'll move on to the speech. So, inshallah, let us recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. صدق الله العظيم. Please recite salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now we'll move on to the poetry. So we have Brother Mehdi Kafaiti. He'll be reciting a few verses of the poetry in Farsi. So please recite salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلى الله عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة وموضع الرسالة.
اللهم
دلا در خانه ابن الرضا را بین، چراغ و چشم زهرا و علی مرتضی را بین، ز انوار رخ ابن الرضا روشن فضا را بین، فروغی دلنشین و دلربا و جان فزا را بین. عروس حضرت زهرا بهار شادی آورده، برای شیعیان امشب امام هادی آورده. دو چشم دل ز هم بگشا که حسن دادگر بینی، در ابناء بشر آینه خیر البشر بینی. در آغوش جواد ابن رضا قرص قمر بینی، بیا تا نخل سر سبز ولایت را ثمر بینی. دوباره شیعه را از نور حق دل منجلی آمد، که از سوم محمد در جهان چارم ولی بینی. همه گیرند جان بر کف، رخ جانان پیدا شد، به گرد شمع رویش یک جهان پروانه پیدا شد. زمین در سینه خورشید خداوندت خجسته باد، جواد ابن الرضا میلاد فرزندت خجسته باد. موحد گشته دل با یاد بسم الله ابرویش، زبور و انجیل و قرآن را بخواند در مصحف رویش. جواد ابن الرضا چون شاخه گل می کند بویش، دل پیغمبران یک سر اسیر طره مویش. چه خوانم مهر یا مه یا چراغ انجمش خوانم، همان بهتر که خود ابن الرضای دومش خوانم. به سیرت مظهر واجب، به صورت امکان، به رخ و شمس و مو و لیل و دل عرش استوى الرحمن. فیوزاتش رسد هم بر ملک پیوسته هم انسان، عبارات و کلام روح افزایش اخو القرآن. به بازار ولایت یوسف زهراست این مولود، یم دو گوهر است و در نو دریاست این مولود. علی نام و محمد صورت است و بوالحسن کنیت، بیاناتش در دلش دریا، کفش باران دمش رحمت، کلامش نور و مهرش دین و حبش معنی طاعت. ولی آفریننده منان امام عالم خلقت، امامت جاودان از او، قیامت را امان از او، حقیقت را زبان از او، طریقت را نشان از او. به کویش بندگی کن خواهی ار عبد خدا گردی، بخوان اوصاف او تا با پیمبر هم صدا گردی. مبادا لحظه ای در عمر خود از او جدا گردی، بکوش انسان که در خط تولایش فدا گردی. بقا خواهی فنا در مکتب سرخ ولایت شو، جمال هادی آل محمد بین هدایت شو. خرد را آبرو با آبرویش بستگی دارد، وجود عالم هستی به مویش بستگی دارد. حیات جاودان بر آب جویش بستگی دارد، شفای دردها بر خاک کویش بستگی دارد. وجود ما به مهر آن امامی مفتخر گردد، که شیر وحشی از آهو به گردش رامتر گردد. ز بحری که همچون اسکری در دل گوهر دارد، زهی بحری که همچون اسکری در دل گوهر دارد، زهی ماهی که از خورشید رویی خوبتر دارد، به پیشانی فروغ حجت ثانی اشر دارد، به صلب خویش مولانا امام منتظر دارد. درود ما به ابناء و به آباء گرام او، خوش آن کس که شد آن هادی اطرت امام او، خوش آن کو کنار تربتش اشک رجا دارد، شرار ناله سوز سینه حال التجا دارد. امامی که از نگاهش درد انس و جان دوا گردد، عجب نبود که میسم هم از او حاجت روا گردد، به دل حال مناجات و به لب ذکر دعا دارد، خداوندا دلم پیوسته شوق سامرا دارد. صلوات.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you so much, Brother Mahdi, for the beautiful recitation of poetry. Inshallah, we'll continue with our program for the celebration of the Wiladat of Imam Ali Al-Naqi. Before we continue, there's just one announcement. We just sent out the email for our Eid al-Ghadir program. So inshallah, if you're planning on attending, please sign up so we know how much food wise and then how much logistically we should be preparing in terms of space for COVID as well. So inshallah, sign up and we'll be continuing with the program with the speech by Sheikh Jafar. Please recite salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. به نستعين. الحمد لله الذي جعل الحمد مفتاحا لذكره وسببا للمزيد من فضله ودليلا على آلائه وعظمته، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، أرواحنا له فداء. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فمن الناس من يقول ربنا آتنا في الدنيا وما له في الآخرة من خلاق، ومنهم من يقول ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صدق الله علي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mu'mineen and mu'minat, first and foremost, I congratulate all of you on the auspicious occasion which we are celebrating this evening. It is the birthday of Imam Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi al-Naqi alayhi afdhalu salatu wasalam, our 10th Imam, who according to some of the narrations and riwayat was born on the 15th day of Dhul Hijjah, and this will be in the year of 812 829. Of course, this years of the Common Era, 829. Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam was born in Medina, or to be more specific, in the suburb by the name of Surayya. And the suburb we mentioned before is the suburb that Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salatu wasalam had established after Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. Meaning when the Imam or Imam Sadiq was martyred and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam no longer had full access or was able to openly teach as Imam Sadiq did in Masjid al-Nabi, Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salatu wasalam, he established this suburb of Medina by the name of Surayya, and he taught there. Likewise, Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam took over that institution when Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salatu wasalam was summoned to Baghdad, and he was also martyred. So Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, he was born in that section of Medina. From the life of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, we see that he lived under 6 of the Abbasid Khulafa, under the Caliphate of Mu'tasim, of Wathiq, of Mutawakkil, of Muntasir, Musta'een, and Mu'taz. So these were the 6 Abbasid Khulafa under which Imam Hadi alayhi salatu lived. And of course, as we understand from the life of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu, the most difficult period of that Khilafat that he lived under was that of Mutawakkil. Mutawakkil, he was someone who pressed and suppressed the Imam very much. And actually he was the one who had summoned Imam Hadi alayhi salatu to Samara, where the Imam was eventually martyred. But we see that Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salatu in each of those situations, in each of those time periods, he interacted with the social circumstances that he had to live under each of the Khulafa. And this is something that perhaps, inshallah, we can expand in future lectures. But nonetheless, what we understand from the social and political context in which Imam Ali al-Hadi alayhi salatu he lived, that the Abbasids, they were dealing with a lot of uprisings, especially from the Shia. Of course, in the time of Imam Rida alayhi salatu, some of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, or at least they followed some of the Ahlul Bayt, the Idrisis, they had established the first government in northern Africa. But we also see that during the time that Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salatu lived, that Qum also became a very strong base for the Shia. And there's no doubt that part of it started during the lifetime of Imam Rida alayhi salatu, as the sister of Imam Rida alayhi salatu, Sayyidah Ma'suma, that she, on her way to Khurasan, that she entered into Qum, and there she passed away. And so her presence there also perhaps added to Qum becoming a very strong base of the Shia, of the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afsalam, and some of those individuals who were from that province, from Qum, that they were in contact with Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salatu, and even the Imam had representatives who were in Qum. Imam Musa Kadhim, Imam Hadi alayhi salatu stated in his biography, roughly during the Khilafat of Wathiq, that the Imam, he had a bit of free reign, that he was able to engage and interact a great deal with the Shia, with the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim, but that began to narrow down during the Khilafat of Mutawakkil. So during that lifetime of Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, they were Shia uprisings. The Abbasid government also began to decline around 861. And then about 7 years later, after the Abbasid governance began to decline, and it was declining because there were a lot of the provinces that were outside of the central Muslim lands that they, although they had allegiance with the Abbasids, they began to have independent governance. And likewise, there were uprisings against the Abbasids close to the central lands of the Muslims. For example, in Baghdad and around Medina, there were a lot of uprisings. So the Abbasids began to lose their power or lose central authority within the Muslim world. And 7 years later, after that, Imam Al-Hadi alayhi wasallam was martyred, was poisoned by Mu'taz. So in 868, the Imam was martyred. The Imam was actually accused of supporting the opposition against the Abbasids. And the initial accusation came during the lifetime of Mutawakkil. Some of the spies of the Abbasid government, they noticed that there were money that was coming to Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam. And so he was being accused of supporting the opposition. Of course, Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, he wrote to Mutawakkil and established and gave him evidence that, no, I am not supporting any of the oppositions. So the Imam, although he did not take part in the uprisings against the Abbasid, meaning physical uprising, or even giving any type of letter or any written statement or document for the Shias or any of the other groups that were rising up against the Abbasids. The Imam, in turn, he taught the followers of Ahlul Bayt, the Shia, very valuable lesson. And inshallah, we want to discuss that lesson tonight and this evening as we commemorate, as we celebrate the life of Imam Al-Hadi alayhi wasallam. And that lesson that he taught the Shia was a lesson so that they can become self-sufficient. And this is very important because the Imam was preparing the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi wasallam for the time of Ghaiba. Whether it be the Ghaibatul Sughra that some of the individuals lived in, and the Ghaibatul Kubra, which we are also living in. Because this idea and concept of self-sufficiency is very important for the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afsalam, especially during that time and under the Abbasids, and even under the some of the other governance that came after the Abbasids, for example, the Mamluks or the Uthmani dynasty, that the Shias had to be self-sufficient. And so we find in two of the hadith of Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, the Imam encouraging the Shia to be self-sufficient and just simply teaching about the dunya and how we interact with this dunya and maintain and strike a balance between spirituality and also our worldly affairs. So Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam is recorded to have said, "Ad-dunya suqun rabiha fiha qawmun wa khasira akharun." So the Imam, he stated that this dunya, this world, is like a market. Some people, they take profit from this dunya, rabiha fiha qawmun, while others khasira, others they lose their wealth, they lose their money. So this is what the Imam, he is teaching us, that again we have to understand that this life and interacting with this world, either we're going to gain or we're going to lose. And how we gain and how we, or if we lose, it depends on whether we understand the true meaning of what Imam Al-Hadi alayhi is stating. So this is why it's important to read the second hadith from Imam Hadi, where he stated, "An-nasu fi dunya bil amwal wa fil akhirati bil a'mal." So this is the key to that success and self-sufficiency of the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salam. So we have to understand that people are in this world or operate, when the modus operandi of people in this world is with wealth, amwal. And the modus operandi and the, you could say, the wealth of the akhirah is bil a'mal, by our actions. And this connects perfectly with verse 200 and 201 of Surah Al-Baqarah, which we recited in the beginning. So chapter 2 of the Quran, verse 200 and 201. So at the latter part of verse 200, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes the state of some people. فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. So there are some individuals who their focus is only on this world. And so they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sustenance. They ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their needs, their hajat. And sometimes we can see that this is quite often the nature of human beings. Sometimes this is our nature, that we recite dua tawassul, we recite some of the other du'as, and when it comes to this section where it says, okay, we need to ask for our hajat, what are we praying for? What are we asking for? And quite often and naturally, if you begin to think of, oh, well, what do I need in this world? What am I short of? Wealth and sustenance, that promotion, or this type of house, this type of car, these type of shoes. So there are some who their hajat are only that. Only what they can grasp, they can tangibly grasp. Unfortunately, this was the way and method of many of the khulafa. And again, this is something that's established in history, even among these khulafa under which Imam Hadi alayhi lived, where we see the khulafa, or this idea or concept of a khalifa, that the person is supposed to be the khalifatullah or khalifatul Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the person who is representing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon earth, or that individual who is taking over the station, the sacred station of governance that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam he once held. And so among these khulafa, Mutawakkil, he was, as I said, someone who oppressed Imam Hadi alayhi salam a great deal, so much so to the point that Imam Hadi alayhi salam actually made dua against Mutawakkil. But if we look at the relationship that Mutawakkil had, because he oppressed a lot of people, so much so that his son Muntasir killed Mutawakkil, assassinated his father. And after he assassinated his father, or had a hand in assassinating his father, he became the Khalifa afterwards. So when we look at this type of action that we see, not only in this group of Khulafa, who were basically from Bani Harun, these are either the son of Harun, who's known in the history as Harun Rashid, Mu'tasim is the son, and the others are the grandson of Harun. And unfortunately, this group of individuals who are displaying none of the akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that people accept that, oh yeah, these are the khulafa. But when the children and the offspring of Rasulullah, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus were denied their rights, and even till today, some say, oh well, we cannot have this succession of individuals of one family, mashallah. But the family of Harun, and of course throughout the history of Islam we see that secession, but a secession of individuals who their perspective on governance, their perspective on interacting with the world fits in with the latter part of verse 200 in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. So that they ask for their worldly gains, but there's no proportion for them in the hereafter. Of course, when a Khalifa who kills another Khalifa, we may ask that what is their proportion in the hereafter. Yes, they gain part of the dunya, but what do they gain for the hereafter? And so that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He explains the proper interaction with this world. He says, فَمِنْهُمْ, and from among people, there's some that when they recite the dua tawassul and the other du'as, and then they are prompted to ask for their hajat. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. They ask for the good of this world and the good of the hereafter. And they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save them and safeguard them from the punishment of the fire. So this shows that there's a balance, or there should be a balance, in our perspective on life and interacting with this world. And so it indicates that Islam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to adopt a middle path in our life, whereby we gain the best of this world, the material world, and the best of the spiritual and ascetic world. And how do we gain this? It is gained through our actions, through our a'mal, as Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, he stated that, one, we have to understand that this world is a market. People will benefit, people will profit, and some people will lose. This, in this world, we will lose or gain with our wealth, and in the hereafter, we will either lose or gain by our actions, by our a'mal. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi wasalam gives a very beautiful hadith, and it also gives us some perspective, practical perspective about verses 200, this latter part of verse 200, and verse 201 of Surah Al-Baqarah, where Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, he explains, he says that what is this hasana that we are asking for dunya wal akhirah? So Imam Sadiq, he says that it is a qalban shakiran, a thankful and a grateful heart. To be thankful and grateful for whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, وَلِسَانًا ذَاكِرًا, and to always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to appreciate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we have a blessing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He answers our dua, He gives us something in this world, then we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say shukran lillah, we say alhamdulillah. Then the third thing, which is a part of this hasan, this khairu dunya wal akhirah, the best of this world and the next world, Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, he says zawjatun mu'minah, so it's a believing spouse, and this believing spouse tu'inuhu fi dunyahu wa ukhrahu, that helps an individual with regards to their dunya, with regards to their worldly life, and also with regards to their life in the hereafter, meaning that these two individuals are aiding and assisting one another in their journey in this world and the journey in the akhirah, or towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in short, we have to make sure that, again, we gain the best in this world, and when we gain the best in this world, as some of the tafsir, they state that the best in this world is also having plenty of wealth and rizq and sustenance, and the best of the next world is to be in the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we combine this, so we understand this, that means that what we do with our wealth is that we take our wealth and we spend it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what we find in the Sirat of Imam Al-Hadi alayhi wasallam. So going back to that Sirat of Imam Hadi, and the accusations that were launched against Imam Hadi, that he was collecting money, and he was again using it towards the opposition of the Bani Abbas. which was a complete lie. We see truly what Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam was doing. That when Imam Hadi, when he collected the money, he was spending on the Shia. He was spending it on the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasallam. Because one of the things that we see at that time, the Shia, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, were being purposely neglected by the government, by the Bani Abbas, that if there was someone who was faqir, someone who was poor, and they were entitled, based on the Sharia, they were entitled to receive a zakat, then the zakat was not being given to them. They were not being helped. Or if the government had sadaqah at their disposal, charity at the disposal, then the Shias were purposely being neglected and left poor. So we find that Imam Hadi alayhi salam, he was actually filling that gap. One individual by the name of Muhammad ibn Hassan, Imam Hadi alayhi salam began to support this Muhammad ibn Hassan when he fell ill. Imam Hadi alayhi salam took care of his expenses throughout his sickness, meaning paid everything that needed to be paid for his family, all of the any expenses that he had. Imam Hadi alayhi salam, in also collecting the money from different parts of the Muslim world, what he began to do as well, according to many of the ulama, as they analyze the sirat of Imam Hadi alayhi salam, he was preparing the Shia for the ghaybat of Imam Zaman Ajr Faraj Sharif. And how so? Imam Hadi, he appointed various representatives. And this is something that, well, we see among the other imams as well. They had representatives, people who were carrying their messages to the mu'mineen when they were arrested, under house arrest, like Imam Musa Kadhim or the other imams. Nonetheless, the way that Imam Hadi alayhi salam organized the representatives were something that resembled the way Imam Zaman Ajr Faraj Sharif, he represented, or he selected representatives during the Ghaybatul Sughra. In fact, one of the representatives, the first representatives of Imam Zaman Ajr Faraj Sharif, Uthman, in the Ghaybatul Sughra, was actually also one of the representatives of Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam. And one example of this representation that we find in the letter of Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam to one of his companions by the name of Ibn Rashid. And this comes in a time where Imam Hadi alayhi salam was in Samara. He had been arrested, so the interaction with the Shia had become limited. Of course, even in Samara, the Imam, he would simply be around Samara. He would walk. He could go out, but he was mainly under house arrest. And sometimes through very brief interactions with individuals, he would educate them. But in order to get the message out to the masses of Shia, or even to help them to manage their affairs, Imam Hadi alayhi salam appointed very specific representatives who pretty much had complete authority from the Imam. And so one of these individuals is Ibn Rashid, where we find that Imam Hadi alayhi salam, he writes a letter to Ibn Rashid, and Ibn Rashid, Ali ibn Rashid as well, Abu Ali ibn Rashid, where he reads this letter to other individuals, a group of followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, who were in Baghdad and in their surrounding area as well. So after the Imam, he praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives salutations upon Muhammad and his family alayhim salam. Imam Hadi, he writes, he says, وَإِنِّي أَقَمْتُ أَبَا عَلِيِّ ibn Rashid مَقَامَ عَلِي ibn Hussein ibn Abd Rabbi. So what happened is that one of the representatives of Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salatu by the name of Ali ibn Hussein. He passed away, or the Imam, he replaced him with Ibn Rashid. And so he tells the Shia through this letter, he says that Ibn Rashid, now he is in that position, and his wilayah is like that of those who came before him. Meaning that the wilayah of Ibn Rashid is like that of Ali ibn Hussein ibn Abdi Rabbi, who Ali ibn Hussein, as we see, at least from his seerah, he was also in biography, that he was one of the fuqaha, one of those individuals who had learned from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam, who had actually writings and books on various aspects of fiqh, about homes, about zakat. So in any case, Imam Hadi alayhi wasalam, he gives this wilayah, or he gives this authority to Ibn Rashid. And he says to the Shia, in order to again make them self-sufficient, he says that كَانَ يَتَوَلَّاهُ غَيْرُهُ, that whatever my representatives had, the wilayat and the authority that they had before Ibn Rashid, he has that. مِنْ وُكَلَاءِ قَبْلَكُمْ لِيَقْبِضَ حَقِّي وَيَرْتَضِيهِ لَكُمْ. So he has the right to accept that which is my right. And what was the rights of the Imam? What was the rights of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam? That right of the khums. And this is what Imam Hadi alayhi wasalam, he's speaking about. So Ibn Rashid is being authorized by Imam Hadi to accept the khums and to distribute that khums. وَيَرْتَضِيهِ لَكُمْ وَقَدَّمْتُهُ في ذلك وهو أهله وموضعه فسيروا رحمكم الله إلى الدفع إليه ذلك. So the Imam, he tells the Shia, he says, so Ibn Rashid, he would collect the khums, he would spend it for the sake of the Shia, again making the Shia self-sufficient. And so he says that, he tells the Shia, he says that I have placed him in this position. Why? Because he is ahlu. He's among those individuals who's worthy of that position. And again, he's someone who's trustworthy, he's someone who's honest, he's someone who is just. So the Imam, he tells him, he says, so go towards him and give him that right, which is my haqq, which is my right. So that give him that khums. And then Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, he says, وأن لا تجعلوا له على أنفسكم علة فعليكم بالخروج عن ذلك. He says that, and don't turn away from him. He says, why? Because his disobedience is disobedience of me. He says, so if you disobey Ibn Rashid, then it's as if you have disobeyed me. If you've turned away from him, then it is as if you have turned away from me. Then the Imam, he gives 4 verses. And in these 4 verses, Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, he lays down, you could say, the cornerstone and the principles for that self-sufficiency, that mindset of being self-sufficient. Because as I said, the Shia, they had to become self-sufficient because they were not being supported by the Abbasids. They were not being supported by any of the governance. Rather, they were being left unprotected. They were being left impoverished. Of course, if it was not for the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam giving them this key, or this foundation of self-sufficiency. So the Imam, he says that وَتَسَرُّوا إِلَى طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ وَتَحْلِيلِ أَمْوَالِكُمْ. He says, so hasten towards the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by giving your homes, by giving that right to Ibn Rashid and having him distribute it on my behalf. He says, and also make your wealth halal. Then the 4 verses that Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam, he mentions, he says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. So verse 2 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, so chapter 5, verse 2. So all of this actions to give the right, that monetary right to Ibn Rashid, through which the Shia, through which the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salam will become self-sufficient, that they didn't need to depend on the Abbasid government or the Mamluks after them or the Ottomani government after them, that the Shia had to help one another, ta'awanu al-birri wa taqwa, to help one another towards good and righteousness and taqwa, and to be God conscious, to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be conscious of that right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has over you, be conscious of the right, that haqq that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus has over you. And if you aid one another and you assist one another in that, like Imam Hadi alayhi afdalus, he taught us that one of the followers of the Imam was sick, could not pay his own expenses, so Imam Al-Hadi, using that right, that haqq, the khums, he assisted that individual, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. So verse 10 of Surah Al-Hujurat, so chapter 49 of the Quran, verse 10, that second principle, that second verse which Imam Al-Hadi alayhi, he wanted Ibn Rashid to bring up and to make the Shia aware of these verses, that this is the mindset that they must have. Help one another based on righteousness and taqwa. And then there's an emphasis on that taqwa in Surah Hujurat, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. And if you operate based on that taqwa, operate based on that God consciousness, that understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you, that understanding of what the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus require from you with one another, your duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your interaction with one another as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus, the Imam says, or as he's indicating from the Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, that perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will shed mercy upon you. And that mercy, that rahmah, is blessing, is ni'mah. It is abundance. The third verse that Imam, he points to, he says, وَاعْتَسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Subhanallah. That's the Imam, he's telling the Shia through this letter that is being read by Ibn Rashid, that the third thing that you must have is that you must have unity among yourselves. That when the entire government, the Abbasids are against you, the Mamluks, the Ottomanis, they came, they were against you. وَاعْتَسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. That if you are a unit, if you're united, then you could be self-sufficient. You won't need the zakat that is coming or the sadaqah that is coming from these governments, the Abbasids or the Ottomanis or the Mamluks. The Shias will be self-sufficient. But it needs that unity, it requires that unity, it requires that taqwa, that God consciousness, and that helping one another based on righteousness. And then the fourth thing, as the Imam, he says, وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. And do not pass away from this world, lest that you are those who are Muslim. In other words, meaning submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not simply reciting or quoting these verses that Imam Hadi, that he mentioned prior to this, but submitting to them, acting upon them. Submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and interacting with one another like Muslims, not like individuals who are unaware of each other, or individuals who are, or you consider someone, oh well, this person is not a believer. No, you interact with him as your Muslim, as your mu'min. Help them towards righteousness and God consciousness. Stay together. Yadullahi ala jama'ah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's authority is with those who are united. And united based on righteousness and God consciousness. This is the message that Imam Hadi alayhi salam, he had Ibn Rashid to deliver to the Shia, to deliver to his followers, a message that is relevant for us today. It's relevant for us today to maintain unity, to move together in righteousness and taqwa and God consciousness. And if we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will shed His mercy upon us. He will bless us abundantly. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us the strength and the wisdom to abide by this advice of Imam al-Hadi alayhi wasallam, especially in this time of ghaiba, where our unity as believers, as mu'mineen, as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi wasallam is more important than ever. A time in which we await the reappearance of Imam Zaman, Ajil Farajul Sharif, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that day come sooner rather than later. And during this time that we await our Imam, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins, to cover our shortcomings, to grant us our needs, our worldly needs and our spiritual needs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon our deceased ones. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure those who are ill among our friends and family members. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the helpers of Imam Zaman. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allahumma ighfir dhunubana wastur ayubana waqdi hawaijana washfi maradana warham amwatana wa'ajjal faraj maulana sahib al-asr wal-zaman waj'alna min a'wanihi wa ansarihi wal mustashhirin bayna yadayhi wa tahta liwa'i bihaqq Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Thank you so much, Sheikh Jafar, for the speech and thought-provoking speech. Inshallah, before we end the program, I again want to remind everyone to sign up for the Ghadir program that IABA is having on Wednesday. We already sent the sign-up sheet on WhatsApp groups as well as the email. So inshallah, we'll make the necessary arrangements according to how many people sign up.